Hello. My name is Einar Guðmundsson, and my job here at Arion Bank, well, in English, I would say corporate entrepreneur. I am in charge of dealing with those fantastic entrepreneurs and leading Arion Bank's work towards the Icelandic startup ecosystem. First, I want to thank Innovate for their fantastic job for the past 3 summers. They are an extremely pleasurable partner to work with. And second of all, I want to thank the fantastic teams. You did an incredible job this summer. For the investors in the room, if any one of you was present where they made their first pitch, well, it was somewhere the difference between 0 and 1. Now, as for the ecosystem here in Iceland, you could say that in general, the support for startups is relatively good, even in an international comparison. In addition to what you see here on the screen, I mean, there are definitely different bodies here in Iceland that support startups. And in addition, there are many more events where and meetups where people from the community meet. And all of this is strengthening the grassroots. Arion Bank has decided to be one of those supporters and trying to stimulate the startup ecosystem. Well, you've seen what we're doing here with Startup Reykjavik, but we have also participated in Startup Energy. We do that with more partners. And what's interesting about this is that there seems to be a need in the market. We see that from the number of applications that we get to those 2 different accelerators. So you see that the acceptance rate into those accelerators is very low, which means that we've already filtered out the good ideas, which is good for you as investors. Not only have we picked good ideas and good teams, we primarily focus on teams and their ability to execute. But we train them, we mentor them, which again is good for investors. What founders do is build a business. They build something that people aspire for, need, or want. And for the past 3 years, we have, through Startup Reykjavik, invested in 30 teams. This is a really inspiring group of people that primarily are working on interesting ideas. Some are more interesting than others, evidently. And I feel very privileged to work with those people in their quest of building a business. So we have, through those 2 accelerators, we are now, the bank is shareholder in 36 companies. Actually, we have exited 1 company. And if you continue this path, the bank will have invested in 64 companies in the year of 2016. Now, that's 64 more companies than if we had not decided to start the 2 different accelerators. So we believe that we are doing something right for the startup community. And as Höskuldur mentioned, the interests are aligned. We are not giving away money. We take equity instead, so the interests are aligned. The success of the companies is our success as well. Now here comes the second part, the government. Well, the government should be an enabler. They should make the environment better in any way. An interesting document was posted from the Prime Ministry, I believe in May or June. How many here have read this document? Please raise your hand. Okay. It's about 1/4. Please read this. It's about 15, 16 pages, and I'm going to point out three points from this document that I like in particular. The government, the caveat of course is that they say it's not financed, so we'll see how if it will realize or not. That the government will increase its support to innovation and increase the amount of capital injected into competitive funds and peer-reviewed funds. This is a fantastic news for especially the early-stage companies and innovators and scientists. It's fairly ambitious. Now, second is that what has been desperately needed is that tax incentives for those who invest in startups will be implemented. Today, the system is like that only the startups themselves get a tax break if they already have or they're licensed or have the stamp to be an innovative company. Now, this is unimportant, and this is a stimulator for the investment community to invest in startups. Oops, sorry, I went the wrong direction. And thirdly, that they want to enable trade with unlisted assets. And that doesn't necessarily mean only startups, but unlisted assets as an asset class. There are many more points in there, but these are the points that are mostly relevant for the startup community. And if they will be implemented, they will be simply really good for the environment. Now we come to the investors. Well, what do? They give money in return for equity. And hopefully they'll add some value through board seating or becoming an advisor as well. If we look at the funding of the companies from the two different accelerators, we know that the money they have received is over 500 million Icelandic kronur. However, most of it is still in the form of grants from Rani's Technology Fund, and much less of it is equity. Putting it into perspective, what NSA Ventures, in addition to angel investors, invested last year, about 700 million, the three vintages or the three batches of companies have received around 500. So most of that money actually came in 2013, because we're not talking investment per year, but in vintage, in per batch. So what does this actually tell us? Well, it tells us that private money is still lacking in the environment. So we've seen that founders and supporters of the community, they are really pushing, and the government is at least trying to do its best to being an enabler. The pull, however, from investors is not yet there, and that's where you come into the picture. Of course, we're hopeful, those of us who work within the environment, that we'll see 1, 2, or 3 new venture capital funds being closed this year, which of course will be a stimulator for investors, because the funds then can invest and bring angels with them, etc., and vice versa. But we are in the point in time where we hopefully have a critical mass of companies that have been started, they have been trained, and are doing exciting things. And we see that just from the fact that now for the first time, at least 4 pension funds registered for this event, which I find interesting. Now, as for investors, the ways to invest, okay, you as an angel investor or an individual can invest directly in a company, or you can, talk to your friends and you can invest individually into a company, or you can pool together, form a company to invest in a startup. For the startup, this option is always best because here there is only one counterparty. In the middle scenario, you have to deal with 5 different shareholders, which becomes more complicated when you're trying to run, let's say, a 2, 3, 4 employee startup. And that's why I want to bring the notion of crowdfunding into this group. How many have heard of crowdfunding? Okay, almost everyone. How many of you heard of equity crowdfunding? Okay. So there are essentially 3 models. One that probably most have heard about is a company like Kickstarter or Indiegogo. Here in Iceland, we have a Carolina Fund. It's simply a model where you donate money because you see a project that you find interesting. All right, I'll give them $100, $200, $10,000, whatever. And the second one is pretty much a peer-to-peer lending model. You lend someone money, and over time, you get it back. However, in equity crowdfunding, you give money, and in return, you get equity. Now, this is a much more complicated process because you need all the documentation. Someone needs to validate the companies. There needs to be a platform that validates the companies, make sure that the presentations, there are agreements, etc., are in place. You have companies that like Seeders and Crowdfunder, they're probably the most known companies outside of Iceland. But in Iceland, we have a startup called Brum that is actually doing the same. They are here today. If you're interested, please see them. So for you investors, please engage yourselves. Speak to the companies. Don't be shy. Speak to other investors. Try to pool up, team up with others, and make meetings. Talk to those, book meetings next week for next week and see the companies. It's important for them, and it can be important to you. And whether you consider yourself as a lead investor, someone who will lead the group of investors, try to find other people that might join you so you won't be this single one who's injecting all the capital. I will be available here. There are other people from Arion Bank as well. So if you're interested in knowing more about how you can go about it, feel free to speak to me. In the newsletter that you should have received at the registration desk, there are some practical tips on how to go about it. I encourage you to read it. And finally, I would simply say happy investing. So, thank you very much.